Hello there, dear students, and welcome to this session on Industrial Revolution. Guys, in our last lecture, we have discussed the syllabus of world history. We have understood the different topics that we need to cover in this subject. And also, we have taken a comprehensive overview on the approach that you will be using for studying world history. And today, we start our journey with the very first topic that we have to cover in this subject, which is Industrial Revolution. So without further ado, let us get started and understand the Industrial Revolution. Here's an interesting quote about this topic. The Industrial Revolution was another of those extraordinary jumps forward in the story of civilization, says Stephen Gardiner. Dear students, there is no doubt that there have been some, moments in the story of human civilization where there was a technological change, and this technological change gave a big catapult to the story of human civilization. Industrial Revolution is by far the most important such moment or technological change which transformed the human story altogether. Before the Industrial Revolution, the human story was about rural agrarian communities largely. Industrial Revolution transformed the human story to that of modern urban societies. It brought about several technological changes in methods of production, transport, communication, you name it. Every aspect of human life has had an impact of this revolution. But its impact does not remain alone or limited to these areas. इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन ने ह्यूमन सोसाइटी को चेंज कर दिया, इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस के पावर डायनामिक्स को ट्रांसफॉर्म कर दिया. It had a great impact on the environment that we live in. So much so that to this date, we can feel the effect of industrial revolution in the kind of lives that we live, in the values that we espouse, and in the kind of interactions that we have between different communities, societies, and nations. इतना ज्यादा प्रोफाउंड चेंज लाने वाली ये डेवलपमेंट है जिसको हिस्ट्री में इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन कहा जाता है. ये कहना गलत नहीं होगा कि इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन इज द बेस फॉर मॉडर्न सोसाइटी. और इसीलिए ये हमेशा फर्स्ट टॉपिक होता है जब भी हम मॉडर्न वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री की बात करते हैं. Many forces are unleashed from this development which are going to transform the human society, which is what we are going to study today. हम समझेंगे कि क्या बैकग्राउंड था, क्या कॉजेस थी जिसकी वजह से इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन हुआ, इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन में क्या चेंजेस और डेवलपमेंट्स आई, और लॉन्ग टर्म में इसने किस तरीके से ह्यूमन स्टोरी को इंपैक्ट किया. ये सारी चीजें और बहुत कुछ आज हम डिस्कस करने जा रहे हैं इस टॉपिक में जिसका नाम है इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन. इससे पहले कि हम आगे बढ़े, यहां पर स्क्रीन पर आप दो क्वेश्चंस देख सकते हैं जो यूपीएससी मेंस में पूछे गए हैं इस टॉपिक्स को लेकर के. क्वेश्चंस हमेशा बैक ऑफ द माइंड रहे तो टॉपिक को पढ़ना समझना ज्यादा आसान होता है. सो दैट्स व्हाई थ्रू आउट दिस सीरीज इट विल बी अ प्रायोरिटी फॉर अस टू ऑलवेज कीप इन माइंड द काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चंस दैट हैव बीन आस्क्ड और पोटेंशियली दैट कैन बी आस्क्ड. सो लेट अस सी द क्वेश्चंस हियर. व्हाई डिड इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन first occur in England? What is it saying? Why did it first occur in England? As in, what were the special context causes which led to industrial revolution first taking place in England? This is one part of the question. Second, discuss the quality of life of the people there during the industrialization. So what were the quality, what were the characteristics of the life that people were leading at that time? And how does it compare with India at present? So एक applied form में भी यहाँ पर मैं क्वेश्चन आपको पूछा है. पहले तो क्यों इंग्लैंड में, ये ऑब्वियस है, हम टॉपिक में देखेंगे ही उसको. उस वक्त की क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ कैसे थी, दिस विल ऑल्सो बी बोर्न आउट. एंड देन दिस वाज समथिंग दैट यूपीएससी gave like a surprise to compare it with present life in India. This you will not find directly before this question was asked in any textbook. It is about your observation and understanding of the topic. So this is the first question that was asked. Apart from this, one more question. Latecomer industrial revolution in Japan. Latecomer industrial revolution in Japan involved certain factors that were markedly different from what the West had experienced. So here again, there's a question based on one of those 9 C's that we have discussed in the first lecture. So here we are seeing what? Comparing or contrasting. Okay. So it's very important that whenever we study things a little bit in comparison, because that enables us to tackle questions like this. Directly or indirectly, a lot of questions will be based on such comparisons. So you can see over here also, this is also a compare type of a question. Life back then in England and in India at present. So this is one important aspect that you must remember while preparing not just world history or history for that matter, but throughout your UPSC journey. You must always have that mind, open for comparing things which are similarly placed. And don't worry, both of these questions in due course of our discussion, we will be seeing the content that is needed for answering these questions. Okay, so let's get started. Right. So what are the sub themes that we are going to see here in this topic? We will understand what is industrial revolution, its background, its context, etc. We'll see why it took place in England first. We'll see how it spread to other parts of the world. Firstly to Europe, then from there onwards to USA, Japan, and then other parts of the colonial world also. Industrial revolution will spread. So what is the story associated with them? Briefly, we'll see that also. What were the consequences or impact? Okay. What were the consequences or impact of this is also what we are going to understand. And lastly, we'll see industrial revolution and its effect on colonialism and imperialism. Okay, so these are the different themes through which we are going to cover this topic. Let's get started. First, let us try to understand what in the first place is industrial revolution. जब भी हम कोई टॉपिक पढ़ना या डिस्कस करना स्टार्ट करते हैं दोस्तों, so first thing that you must identify is what is the central concept, what is the core concept in that topic, and try to understand that concept clearly. Okay, so let us now dive in and see in the first place कि industrial revolution का मतलब क्या होता है. Industrial revolution ये एक पीरियड भी है और एक तरीके से एक मूवमेंट भी है. It is both a period as well as a movement which starts in mid 18th century England. यहां से इसकी शुरुआत होती है. इस पीरियड में, इस मूवमेंट में क्या हो रहा है? There is a new system of production or manufacturing that is coming about that enabled mass production of goods using machines. Previously, goods were produced using human labor, using human hands and basic simple tools. Industrial revolution brought about a fundamental change in this system of production. Now, using machines, it was possible to produce goods on a large scale, that is mass produce, in less time as well as cost. Naturally, जब आप कोई चीज मास प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, बड़े स्केल पर प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, मशीन के जरिए से प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, तो उसमें लगने वाली जो लागत है, कॉस्ट है और टाइम, ये दोनों भी क्या होते हैं? रिड्यूस होते हैं. So industrial revolution enabled this. It relied not just on human power but also it used coal as a fuel to power the machines. ठीक है? Coal was used because of its intrinsic calorific value to heat water, which generated steam, and then steam was used to run the machines. Industrial revolution also used developments in modern transportation that were taking place at that time. Modern transportation then included canals. England had a lot of crisscrossing rivers and tributaries, and these crisscrossing rivers and tributaries enabled development of a network of canals which could be used to transport both raw material as well as finished goods. Modern steamships were built now. Steam engine was used both in the factories as well as in transportation. Modern Pakka roads, what we call as Pakka roads, they are called as macadamized roads by the name of the Scottish engineer Macadam, who developed those roads. Okay, so basically the roads, that tar roads that you might have seen in, now of course there is more concretization, but the tar roads were common until very recently. So you first lay a layer of big or rather crushed rocks, then very fine rocks, and then over that you have dust, and then over that you have tar. All of that is rolled with a heavy roller, so that creates a road which becomes a all-weather road. That Pakka road is called as macadamized roads, which started in Britain during Industrial Revolution. Also, use of railways from 1814 onwards. We'll see the start of railways there in Britain. 1814 first for transporting of coal and other things, or फिर 1833 say transport of people also, right? So industrial revolution used these modern transportation. Initially, the focus of this revolution was on textile industry. शुरुआत जो है इस क्रांति की वो टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री से होती है. कपड़ा बनाने की जो इंडस्ट्री है, textile is the cloth is one of the basic necessities of human beings. There are many factors that we are going to see in due course of discussion that made textile the first and most prominent industry for which industrial revolution took place, and then later on it will shift to other industries also, but to begin with it starts from textile. Okay, इंग्लैंड से शुरू हुआ, टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री से शुरू हुआ, एंड देन इट स्प्रेड टू अदर कंट्रीज ऑफ द वर्ल्ड ऑल्सो. फर्स्टली टू यूरोप, पहले बेल्जियम, नेदरलैंड, वहां पर में, देन आफ्टर दैट फ्रांस, then after that we'll see to other eastern parts of Europe. Russia will get industrialized, Japan and USA will get industrialized, so on and so forth, and in this manner we'll see that industrial revolution will go ahead. धीरे धीरे Europe got transformed from agrarian communities to an industrial society. ठीक है, so rural communities से transform हो करके एक modern industrial society में Europe change होगा. This will be the transition that industrial revolution will bring about. Okay, ये क्रांति शुरू तो हुई थी basically about this production, manufacturing, लेकिन इस क्रांति ने हर aspect of human life को affect किया. So it was not just about technology, it affected human society. We'll see how in detail human society got transformed from agrarian to urban. Okay, from being cottage based, in the cottage industry based, to being factory based. Economy got transformed, international relations and polity got transformed. Every aspect of human life got transformed in this journey of industrial revolution. Okay, this is how industrial revolution takes place in the first phase. After the first phase of industrial revolution, which starts from mid 18th century, मिड 18th सेंचुरी से होकर के 19th सेंचुरी में ये स्प्रेड होना स्टार्ट होता है, एंड देन लेटर ऑन we'll see that there will be a second wave of industrial revolution which will start from 1870s onwards. First wave is from mid 18th century and second wave is from 1870s onwards. So what changed now? Earlier we saw that the focus of industrial revolution was only on one industry, which is the textile industry. Okay, but subsequently the developments that had taken place in manufacturing processes, the knowledge that Europe had accumulated through that process, the processes that they had developed for producing of goods, all of those things were later on applied in other industries, particularly in steel and chemical. There were others also, like for example cement and some other industries, but then steel and chemical were the most important. Second wave mein we'll see this major change. Next change will be newer countries will now start to take lead. Earlier it started with England. Britain was the dominant player in the industrial revolution, but in subsequent phase there will be a major change. Now other countries will start to catch up. 1870 में unification of Germany की process complete हो चुकी है, and Germans will, under the leadership of Russia, the Germans will rapidly march on the path of industrialization. So Germany will take over and will come very close to Britain. USA on the other side of Atlantic, 1865, civil war takes place in USA. The internal conflict is resolved, and after that America will also go on the path of rapid industrialization. So America will also become a major industrial power. 1870, again Japan, we'll see Meiji restoration. We're going to see all of these things in detail. 1870, Japan sees a major event in its history. Japan consciously decides to leave behind the feudal medieval kind of past and transform to a modern industrial society. And from that point onwards, Japan will be another major industrial power that will emerge. Unlike earlier times where coal was the most dominant fuel, now we'll see petroleum will be used, electric generator will be used, internal combustion engine will be used instead of steam engine. These will be the technological changes that will be brought about in Industrial Revolution's second phase. Okay, so I have given you a basic primer about what is happening in Industrial Revolution. Now let me just very succinctly summarize it. हम एक की concept के तौर पर में इसको देखते हैं कि Industrial Revolution मतलब क्या है. At the core, Industrial Revolution is about a new system of production जिसमें capital, पूंजी, capital is used or is invested to bring some things in one place. What are those things? Machine tools, human labor, raw material. All of this is brought in one place, which is called as the factory. Raw material, machine and human labor is brought in one place, in one setup, in one unit, which is called as the factory. Who is doing it? Capital is doing it. As in the capitalist who has the capital for investment, he is getting this done. All of this is being brought where? In one place, which is called as factory. This factory uses modern power. Unlike medieval times where only human and animal power was used to produce something, here the major change is that now power is being used not just of human beings and animals, but also modern mechanical power is being used, right? So running water or water heated and steam generated out of it, that is being used to run the processes in the factory. All of this together enabled mass production of goods in less time and less cost. This is basically Industrial Revolution. Less time and less cost. Okay? This Industrial Revolution starts first in England and then spreads to other countries of the world. We are going to see that journey also in due course. So I hope you've understood the basic idea of Industrial Revolution. This Industrial Revolution will have a huge impact on every aspect of human life, including generating forces such as imperialism and colonialism in due course of time. So this is the basic concept, guys. Now let us go ahead and try to understand a little bit of background about the history of Europe so that we can understand modern Europe more effectively. Dear students, history cannot be understood in isolation. You cannot just take up one topic and understand that topic alone. You have to understand a little bit of background regarding what was happening in the past. Without understanding that past, it is difficult to understand that particular period. तो इसलिए हमारी ये कोशिश है इस लेक्चर में कि हम यूरोप की हिस्ट्री का थोड़ा सा बैकग्राउंड और थोड़ा सा पास्ट देख करके आए, ताकि जब ये ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन होता है मॉडर्न यूरोप की तरफ, हम उस ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन को क्लियरली समझ सकें. ठीक है, जब तक हम कॉन्ट्रास्ट नहीं जानेंगे कि यूरोप एंशिएंट मिडिवल टाइम्स में क्या कर रहा था, तब तक हम मॉडर्न पीरियड में जो बदलाव आया है उसको हम अप्रिशिएट नहीं कर पाएंगे. So for that reason, we have to go back a little bit in history. Okay, Europe around 200 years before Christ, sees the rise of Roman Empire. This Roman Empire reaches its peak somewhere around 180 or 100 years after Christ. Okay, this is the map of Europe, or you can say Roman Empire rather, at its peak, which occupies a large part of Europe. You can see here Britannia, France, Spain, France, Italy, a large part of eastern part of Europe also, Asia Minor, then Levant ka area, then northern Africa. So a great part of the landmass on either side of Mediterranean Sea was occupied by this great empire, which we know in history as the Roman Empire. This is the peak, dear students, of Roman Empire. So you can imagine, starting from the core over here in Rome or Italy, it spreads out and goes on to conquer such distant lands and bring all of those under a single unified power. This was the largest empire that Europe had seen till that point of time. So आप इमेजिन कर सकते हैं दोस्तों कि इतने बड़े एरिया की रिसोर्सेज, चाहे वो ह्यूमन रिसोर्स हो, मटेरियल रिसोर्स हो, इस सारे एरिया का ट्रेड, ये सारी चीजें एक सिंगल पावर के अंडर में जब आ जाती है, तो किस कदर, किस लेवल की डेवलपमेंट वहां पर में हो सकती है. Consequently, we see that the Roman Empire is able to achieve great heights in different fields. You see, in architecture, the Roman Empire produced great marvels. Great marvels. The Roman architecture with its use of arches. Arch आप जिसको हिंदी में हम कमान कहते हैं. The arch was an architectural marvel that the Romans were able to produce. The arch enabled creation of domes. Arch जो है वो 2 dimension में होता है. उसको अगर आप 3D में अगर आप घुमा लें तो उसमें से डोम बनता है. And when you have domes, you can have big halls without pillars. This great architectural development was done by Romans. They built great buildings such as colosseums. These colosseums were large stadiums that could have 35 to 40,000 people sitting and watching some sporting event in the arena. आपने ग्लैडिएटर मूवी देखी होगी या और हॉलीवुड मूवीज देखी होगी, where these gladiators are fighting each other or fighting wild animals and beasts, and people are watching. So those stadiums were called as colosseums, and some of them were as huge as, accommodating 35 to 40,000 people also. They were designed in such a manner that every seat, wherever you sat in the stadium, you had a clear view of the arena. So you can imagine the level of accomplishment in terms of architecture, in terms of mathematics, to build something as massive as that. So many such buildings were built. They built sophisticated road networks that connected the entire empire. From one corner of the empire, from northern Africa, right up to the edges of Roman Empire in Europe, one could travel by these roads. Even today in Italy, in many places, roads and bridges built in those times are still extant. They are even used by the locals over there. So this was the kind of elaborate road network they built. They built an advanced legal system. They left behind literature. Trade and commerce was thriving. So all in all, Roman Empire के period में हम देखते हैं that Europe is doing very well. At this point, Europe had not yet turned to Christianity. Europeans, under the Roman Empire, they had their own local belief systems, जिनको pagan beliefs कहा जाता है, PAGAN, largely traditional and primitive beliefs, जिसके अंदर में forces of nature को personify किया जाता है और उनको different forms of gods के तौर पर में worship किया जाता है. Okay, but a major transformation in this takes place around the 3rd century AD. 3rd century AD में रोमन एम्परर उस वक्त में जो था कॉन्स्टेंटीन, he got to know about the message of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ had died long ago, but there were some ardent followers of his faith or belief, and their ideas were carried, and those ideas were carried by these Christians who were very few in numbers. But their message or appeal was resonated with the ruler Constantine, and therefore we see that he accepted Christianity around 3rd century AD. And since he accepted Christianity, Christianity became the sort of a state religion. State in a way patronized it. His mother was also a devout Christian, and consequently we'll see that across Europe the spread of Christianity will become very rapid. And that is the reason why we see that West is Christian today. So that's a very landmark development that we must know in the background. Okay. Now, all of this starts to change around 4th century AD. This massive Roman Empire that we just spoke about was constantly facing, attacks from these northern areas. Tribes from Germania, particularly modern day Germany, those were constantly fighting the Romans. The Visigoths, particularly, were harassing the Roman frontiers. And because of these constant wars and battles with these tribes, the Roman Empire ultimately, crushed under its own weight. And in 4th century AD, or Common Era, 4th century CE, also it is called, the massive Roman Empire got divided into two parts. On the left side is the Western Roman Empire, and on the right side is the Eastern Roman Empire. Western and Eastern Roman Empire. ईस्टर्न रोमन एम्पायर का कैपिटल था यहां पर में कॉन्स्टेंटिनोपल, मॉडर्न डे इस्तंबुल. ओके, सो हियर इट इज नियर बॉस्फोरस स्ट्रेट्स, ब्लैक सी के पास, वेरी स्ट्रेटेजिक लोकेशन. हियर was the capital of Eastern Roman Empire. Western Roman Empire over the next few centuries got fractured and got divided into smaller kingdoms. Eastern Roman Empire, on the other hand, it remained intact to some extent, but over the centuries इसकी भी एरिया जो है वो श्रिंक होती चली जाएगी. ठीक है, तो ये हमको देखने को मिलता है यूरोप में as we start the medieval age of Europe. So 4th century CE onwards आप ये कह सकते हैं कि यूरोप medieval age के अंदर में चला जाता है. ठीक है, so now there is no one single Roman Empire, no centralized political power. Europe is divided into two parts, Western and Eastern Roman Empire. And throughout the medieval period, Western Roman Empire will get fractured into further smaller kingdoms. Eastern Roman Empire will remain intact, but it will go on shrinking. Okay? So this is what we'll see in medieval Europe. Consequently, unlike ancient Europe, where there was trade, commerce, there was development, there was architecture, there was literature, so on and so forth, medieval Europe is also called as the Dark Age. There is debate in historians if this term is right or no, but for simplicity's sake, we can understand from this term what kind of environment was there in Europe during this period. This period is called as the Dark Age. Now, why was it the Dark Age, so to speak, for Europe? When we go into the medieval period, we see that Europe's life became completely church-centric. Church-centric life. You remember we discussed Christianity had spread across Europe? And with the spread of Christianity, slowly, steadily, we see that the institution of church became most dominant in the socio-religious cultural life of Europeans. This church was headed by an authority called as the Pope. Pope had the power to interpret what is said in the Bible. So entire religious authority was now concentrated in the hands of the papacy or the institution of Pope. whatever the Pope said regarding religion, that was to be accepted without any critical thinking or any sort of questioning. Okay? And one idea that came out of this church centric life was that man is born in sin. Okay? Christian belief tha that, when God had sent Adam to earth, it was a form of a punishment, right? He and his wife Eve were living in heaven, and God had asked them not to commit a particular sin. He had forbidden them from eating a particular fruit, but they still consumed that, and that is why they were punished and sent to earth. So एक thought या एक belief आया कि human beings जो है, their birth is in sin, and therefore the purpose of life, human life, is redemption of that sin. उस गुनाह से, उस sin से छुटकारा या मुक्ति प्राप्त करना, ये हमारे लाइफ का पर्पस है. कैसे छुटकारा मिलेगा, कैसे मुक्ति मिलेगी उससे? That will be shown by whom? By the religious authority. Okay, you have to obey what the religious authority says. The kind of life they want you to live, you have to live that way, and only then you will get this redemption ultimately, and you will go to heaven. Now, to begin with, religion is important, and living a moral life is always very crucial for a healthy human society. But then, when religious power gets concentrated in the hands of one particular authority, then there is always a chance of abuse, and that is what happened in Europe. This power, this authority was abused by those who were wielding it. Europe slowly started to regress. No new ideas, no new technological or scientific developments were taking place. Everything was ultimately about the book, that is Bible, and the Pope. Whatever the Pope interpreted from the Bible, that was final. Nobody was allowed to question, to go beyond, to do experiment or bring about new developments. Along with this, Europe also saw the rise of many different weak kings. Unlike earlier Roman Empire, where you had very powerful rulers, may it be Constantine, may it be Julius Caesar, or many other, Nero also for that matter. There were some good, there were some bad emperors, but then all of those emperors were really very powerful men. Now, power concentrated in one person's hand has its problems, but at least the entire system works coherently. But medieval Europe में क्या हुआ? Europe got divided into small kingdoms, and these small kingdoms had weak kings who depended on the authority of the Pope. It was the Pope who gave them the throne or the crown, and therefore they were above them, dependent on the Pope. And below these weak kings were the feudal lords. The feudal lords. These feudal lords were given land assignments by the king. अब क्या होती है लैंड असाइनमेंट्स? ये जो राजा है, ये अपने नीचे मल्टीपल फ्यूडल लॉर्ड्स को अपने किंगडम में बड़ी बड़ी लैंड टेरिटरीज देते थे. ओके, these feudal lords were supposed to collect resources or money from the people in the form of rent and pass it on to the king in the form of revenue. So if we were to write it like this, you have the king at the top, then you have the feudal below him, and below him you have the masses, or you can say the peasantry. Okay? These masses or the peasants, they give what? They give rent to the feudal lord, and this feudal lord then passes it on in the form of revenue to the king. Okay? Of course, in between, whatever rent is received, this lord is going to keep a substantial part of it for himself. He will keep his share, and remaining he will pass on as revenue. And whatever share he keeps from this money that is derived from the masses or peasantry, he is also going to maintain troops, soldiers. ठीक है, ट्रूप्स क्यों? अब देखिए मासेस के पास से पैसा निकलवाना है, राइट? Who likes to give money? Nobody likes to give your hard-earned, money or resources to the state. So you need force for that, right? So for that, for the sake of that force, he needs troops. So अब ये troops की salary कहाँ से आएगी? So these troops were maintained from the rent that was coming and the share out of which that the feudal lord was keeping with himself. Whenever the king needed troops, the feudal lord was supposed to present it to the king for fighting wars with another neighbor king if the need be. The feudal lord is supposed to come personally with his troops and fight for the king. ठीक है, तो टेक्निकली इस तरीके से ये सिस्टम वर्क करता था, फ्यूडल सिस्टम. अब नेचुरली the king is dependent on the feudal lord for two very important things: for revenue, one, and also for these troops. So the king is perpetually dependent on the feudal lords. Over the period of time, these feudal lords became hereditary and also became very powerful. They could not be transferred. They had their local roots very strong, and therefore the king could not challenge these feudal lords. These feudal lords built, strong castles, जिसको हम हिंदी में गढ़ी कहते हैं दोस्तों, छोटे छोटे किले. They built castles in mountainous areas so that even if the king came to challenge the feudal lord to remove him, these feudal lords could go inside their castles, which were stocked with men, material, resources for several months, and they could live a Majani life inside their castle while the king and his army are starving outside, somehow trying to get inside the castle. Ultimately, the kings realized that it's not possible to subdue the feudal lords, and therefore the kings became very weak authority. और जब राजा कमजोर होता है तो नेचुरली स्टेट कमजोर होता है, और जब स्टेट कमजोर होता है तो आगे की डेवलपमेंट्स नहीं हो पाती. So this is the kind of political system that was there in Europe at this point. These feudal lords had to extract the rent from the masses, and therefore they had to live closer to whom? Closer to the masses. And the masses were living in rural areas, not in cities. Consequently, the feudal lords and other elites, they migrated from cities to rural areas. आपने देखा होगा दोस्तों, पुरानी हिंदी फिल्मों के अंदर में you'll see that there used to be this character of ठाकुर साहब. ठीक है, ठाकुर साहब lived in rural area in a big हवेली. हिंदी फिल्मों में डायलॉग भी होता था ना, आओ हवेली पर. ठीक है, so this Thakur Sahab lives in rural areas because he has great land over there which is being cultivated by local villagers. He has to keep a control on those people. And see, it's not a coincidence. This Thakur Sahab in the movie used to be a very exploitative character. तो वो क्या कर रहा है, घोड़े पर घूम रहा है और वो हंटर से लोगों को मार रहा है. He's kidnapping people, doing so all sort of nonsense things. So why is that so? Because he has to keep a control on these masses, right? That is the essence of feudal system. So all these feudal elites, they went from cities to where? To rural areas. And consequently, cities started to decay. Europe, जो Roman Empire के time में was dotted by many thriving cities, now cities started to decay. Why? Because the elites, the rich people, they have left the cities and they have gone where? They have gone to rural areas. जब cities decay होने लगती है तो economy ruralize हो जाती है. Ruralization of economy in medieval Europe. Slowly monetization जो है economy के अंदर में कम होने लगता है. Everything becomes agriculture based and barter system based. These masses are providing physical labor to the lords. They're providing the agricultural stuff that they are producing. Slowly, steadily, trade and commerce is going to reduce. The need for money is going to reduce, and agriculture will start to, become more and more backward. No new developments take place. No technological advancement take place. और इस सब situation में human labor becomes very crucial. Human labor becomes very crucial. और इस में से आई है प्रैक्टिस ऑफ सर्फडम. Serfdom. Now, what is meant by serfdom? What is this practice of serfdom? Serfs were hereditary human labor tied to the land, जिसको हम हिंदी में बंधुआ मजदूर कहते हैं. बंधुआ. These people were hereditary workers on the farms who were tied to the land. Means what? एक बड़ा जमीन का पैच है जिसके ऊपर में एक सर्व फैमिली जो है वो ह्यूमन लेबर प्रोवाइड करती है टू द ओनर ऑफ द लैंड. सुबह से शाम तक वो उस जमीन के ऊपर में जो भी खेती के जो भी काम होते हैं वो सब कुछ वो लोग करते हैं, एंड दे आर प्रोवाइडिंग दिस सर्विस टू द लॉर्ड हु ओन्स द लैंड. नाउ सपोज दिस लॉर्ड सेल्स हिज लैंड टू समबडी एल्स. ठीक है, से मिस्टर एक्स ओन्स द लैंड and he sells this land to Y. This family of serfs who is tied to the land will now serve Y instead of X. They will remain there in that village only, serving on that land to whomsoever the owner might be. Hereditarily ये system चला आता है. This system is called as serfdom. क्यों जरूरत पड़ रही है इसकी? क्योंकि एग्रीकल्चर बैकवर्ड है. बैकवर्ड होने की वजह से यू नीड ह्यूमन रिसोर्स, और ह्यूमन रिसोर्स आपको चीप चाहिए. सो फ्यूडल व्यवस्था में, इन फ्यूडल सिस्टम, दिस कंसेप्ट ऑफ सर्फडम इवॉल्व्ड, वेयर पीपल आर टाइड टू द लैंड. जमीन से बंधे हुए हैं, नॉट फिजिकली ऑफ कोर्स, बट दे कैन नॉट गो एनीवेयर एल्स. दे कैन नॉट माइग्रेट. दे कैन नॉट गेट आउट ऑफ द सिस्टम. Hereditarily, they will continue to serve the land in this manner. This is called as serfdom. Now, this is different from another concept which is called as slavery. Okay, how is it different from slavery? Slavery mein, the slave is owned by the slave master. But in serfdom, it's not about the master, it's about the land. That particular person who is the serf is attached to land. Slavery mein he is attached to the master. So if the master of the slave goes to some other country, the slave will have to go with that master to that country to serve him. Okay, but for the sake of serf, this does not work like this. The serf will remain there because land cannot go anywhere. Na? He is attached to the land, and slave is attached to whom? Slave is attached to the master. So I hope you got the difference between the two. Okay, slave can buy his freedom. A serf cannot buy his freedom. Serf cannot buy it. Okay? So this is a huge difference. Serfdom was even worse in some ways than slavery. So this is the nature of medieval Europe that we see. I hope you understood, guys. हमने ancient Europe देखा under the Romans and how it was more flourishing and prosperous. Then we saw the dark age of Europe with its key characteristics. Now we will see the transformation from this medieval dark age to modern period. How this transition takes place is what we are going to see now. A very crucial event takes place in this context in the year 1453, known as the fall of Constantinople. Constantinople या modern day Istanbul जिसको हम कहते हैं, was the capital of, you remember, Eastern Roman Empire. 400 common era, breakup of Roman Empire, Western and Eastern. Eastern Roman Empire बहुत shrink हो गया था, but still it was, excuse me for this. Eastern Roman Empire had shrunk a lot, but still it was existing, and its capital was Constantinople. Constantinople is very strategically located, as you can see over here. It is like the doorway for Black Sea. Doorway for Black Sea. It is also the land bridge that connected Europe with Asia. So that's why this location was very, very strategic. Around the 14th century, there is a rise of Sunni Muslim power called as the Ottomans in the area of Asia Minor. और ये जो सुन्नी ऑटोमन पावर है ये एक्सपैंड करता चला जाएगा टूवर्ड्स यूरोप एंड दिस पावर हैड द ड्रीम ऑफ कैप्चरिंग द कैपिटल ऑफ ईस्टर्न रोमन एम्पायर कॉन्स्टेंटिनोपल. ठीक है. फाइनली अंडर अ यंग सुल्तान Mehmed the Conqueror, this capital city of Constantinople fell to the Ottomans who had their territory here in 1453. It was captured in 1453. The young sultan, from a very young age as a child, had this dream of capturing this city. His father had tried and failed multiple times, and therefore he had that burning desire कि मुझे इस शहर को जीतना है. सुल्तान से पहले 20 armies, 20 armies had tried to capture the city of Constantinople, but everybody had failed because of the strong defenses. 3 concentric दीवारों के अंदर में ये शहर था कॉन्स्टेंटिनोपल का और कोई उसे जीत नहीं पाया था. But this young sultan, barely in his early 20s, he was able to win this city of Constantinople. So, why is this such a landmark event? अब जब ये city of Constantinople ऑटोमन्स के हाथ में चली गई तो उसकी वजह से ये सारा जो एरिया का ट्रेड है that was now under Ottoman control. This trade connecting Europe and Asia. Remember, this was the route that was used on the ancient Silk route. So this trade was now completely in the hands of the Ottomans. And because of this, overland trade route became unsafe and expensive for European traders. एशिया से आने वाला माल, चाइना, इंडिया से particularly, the spices, the silk, the tea, all of these luxurious products which were in huge demand in Europe, all of those products now became very difficult for Europeans to get. Naturally, there was a lot of black marketing and a lot of price escalation of all of these goods in European markets, particularly Portugal and Spain. Because of this, Europeans felt that we need to find out some alternate route to reach to Asia, particularly India and China. But land route was not possible because this was the only way that they could come, and therefore they decided that we need to look for safe sea route. और इस खोज में पहल की सबसे पहले पोर्चुगल ने और फिर उसके बाद में स्पेन ने. हेनरी द नेविगेटर, एक बड़ा फेमस प्रिंस था पोर्चुगीज का. He sponsored a lot of different expeditions from Portugal towards Asia so that some safe route could be found out. पोर्चुगीज की देखा देखी कुछ ही सालों में स्पेनियार्ड्स ने भी इसकी शुरुआत जो है वो कर दी थी. यूरोप अराउंड दिस टाइम वाज चेंजिंग. यूरोप में एक नई मूवमेंट की शुरुआत हो चुकी थी, which is called as Renaissance in history. Europeans, after coming in contact with the Arabs and Muslims, they realized that in the medieval age they have become very backward. Around a millennia ago, they were very advanced, Roman period में. But medieval age में Europeans had become ossified in time. They had become very backward. So they felt that we should do something to regain our ancient great glory. This movement was called as Renaissance, which basically means rebirth. Europeans started to again go back to their own history and see how they had achieved greatness in ancient times. They started to again study their own literature. They started to again read about their great rulers. They started to, research on important scientific developments that had taken place in those times. So all of these changes start in the period of Renaissance. Because of this, a new scientific temper was now ushered in Europe. Europeans who were superstitious, who were backward, who were obsessed with religion, now started to shrug all of that off. And they started to focus on development of science and technology. साइंस की डेवलपमेंट्स आप देखेंगे, यही वो पीरियड है जहां पर में आप सारे बड़े साइंटिस्ट के नाम पढ़ते हैं. केपलर, then you can say about Newton, right? Copernicus, Galileo, Bruno. If you see, their period is around just before this, these developments take place. So Europeans started to challenge what was being said by the church, by the Pope, what was being, pushed down their throat on the name in the name of religion. Bible कहता था the world is flat, that we are in a geocentric universe. यूरोपियंस ने कहा, साइंटिस्ट ने कहा कि नो, वी आर इन अ heliocentric universe. Sun is at the center and we are revolving around it. They had to pay great price. ब्रूनो को जिंदा जलाया गया, right? गैलीलियो को जो है वो नजर कैद किया गया. Many other scientists had to suffer, but Europe was changing. These new scientific developments were taking place. अब विवेक यानी रीजन, तर्क के आधार पर बात मानी जाएगी. पहले it was religious authority. Whatever Pope says is final. Whatever is written in Bible, that is unquestionable. But now Europeans said no. We are not going to accept something only because Pope is saying, or something because it is written in Bible. We will accept something only when it is logical, consistent with reason. Only then we will accept. जब ये scientific spirit usher in हुआ, तो फिर consequently the impact of church on Europeans' minds started to decline, and we entered the age of Enlightenment. This age of Enlightenment brought about a new approach or new attitude in Europeans. Now, empowered with scientific know-how, these Europeans set out to find alternate, safe sea route to Asia in general and India, China in particular. निकल पड़े फिर यूरोप से जॉन कैबॉट, कोलंबस, अमेरिगो वेस्पुसी, उसके बाद में people like Magellan and many other such great explorers अटलांटिक की दिशा में निकल पड़े, क्योंकि साइंस कहता था कि वर्ल्ड इज लाइक अ बॉल, स्फेरिकल है. So if we set out in this direction, then someday circumnavigate करते हुए we are going to reach Asia. So with this kind of hope, they set out into the Atlantic, without knowing that on the other side of the Atlantic there are two massive continents, North and South America. उस वक्त तो पता नहीं था ना. All that was known was old world, यानी यूरोप और एशिया. अफ्रीका का भी जो कोस्टल नॉर्दर्न एरिया है उतना ही. Yes, they knew Africa is big, but not how big it was. इंटीरियर में तो कोई गया ही नहीं था. That's why it was called as dark continent by Europeans. One reason why it was called as dark continent. तो अब इस उम्मीद में कि हम एशिया पहुंच जाएंगे अटलांटिक में घूमते घूमते, right? The European travelers set out. And then when they set out, they accidentally made many new geographical discoveries. North America was found, South America was found, the Caribbean islands were found. So many different new areas were found by these Europeans. Initially, they did not realize that they have reached a new place. They have discovered something new. Columbus felt, when he reached the West Indian islands, he felt that he has come to the outskirts of Asia. The local tribes over there, he felt that these were Indians only, basically, right? But Amerigo Vespucci realized that he has discovered something new. And that's why when he went back to Europe, he wrote a book called as The New World. What is that book called? The New World. एक नई दुनिया. और इसीलिए ये जो कॉन्टिनेंट्स हैं इनको आज भी न्यू वर्ल्ड कहा जाता है, and others are called as the old world. Why? Because of the name or title of that book, New World. UPSC ने prelims में एक जगह पर में ये सवाल पूछा था, which are the crops that have been introduced from the New World to the old. Okay, so उसके अंदर में tobacco and some other such crops, potato. I don't remember the exact names, but some of these crops were mentioned. The tobacco was brought from South America to Asia. बहरहाल तो ये न्यू वर्ल्ड इस तरीके से डिस्कवर हुआ. जब ये न्यू वर्ल्ड मिला, देखिए मैं आपको एक एक चीज को लॉजिकली ले जा रहा हूं, वन थिंग लीडिंग टू दी नेक्स्ट. एंशिएंट रोमन एम्पायर डिक्लाइन, मिडिवल एज उसकी कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स, चर्च डोमिनेटेड लाइफ, देन द ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन, वी आर गोइंग टुवर्ड्स द मॉडर्न पीरियड नाउ. रेनेसांस, रेफॉर्मेशन, एनलाइटनमेंट, न्यू ज्योग्राफिकल डिस्कवरीज. जब ये ज्योग्राफिकल डिस्कवरीज हुई तो पता चला कि इन एरियाज में देयर आर अ लॉट ऑफ रिसोर्सेस. These resources can come in very handy for Europe. Therefore, these European powers started to establish what are called as colonies. What are called as colonies in these distant areas. पोर्चुगल, स्पेन ने सबसे पहले स्टार्ट किया, फिर धीरे धीरे बाकी यूरोपियन पावर्स भी अपनी कॉलोनीज इन एरियाज में बनाने लगी. और जब ये कॉलोनीज बनी तो इन कॉलोनीज को जरूरत थी यूरोप के फिनिश्ड गुड्स की, finished goods from Europe, and they could provide in return raw material. Right? So this started a long distance trade between Europe and these colonies. Long distance trade की शुरुआत हुई. ब्रिटेन से जो है वो रम है, कटलरी है, वेपन्स हैं, राइट, टूल्स एंड इम्प्लीमेंट्स हैं, ये सारी चीजें जाती थी कहाँ पर में, टूवर्ड्स दीज कॉलोनीज. और इन कॉलोनीज से फिर शुगर है या और दूसरी चीजें हैं, एग्रीकल्चरल प्रोडक्ट्स हैं, दोस कुड बी सेंट बैक टू ब्रिटेन एंड अदर यूरोपियन कंट्रीज. दिस इज लॉन्ग डिस्टेंस ट्रेड बिटवीन यूरोप एंड दीज कॉलोनीज. इस लॉन्ग डिस्टेंस ट्रेड को करने के लिए एक नया क्लास ऑफ ट्रेडर्स इमर्ज हुआ, which is called as merchants. These were specialists in long distance trade. यूरोप के फ्यूडल समाज के अंदर में मिडिवल टाइम्स में the merchant class had shrunk. It had become very insignificant. But with this new opportunity, once again, we will see the rise of big, powerful merchants. These merchants will take the risk of trading over such huge distance. आप imagine कीजिए in those times, traveling across the Atlantic. These were not easy routes. There were a lot of storms. There were a lot of pirates. There was competition with other countries. There was a lot of looting that went on. So you needed an appetite for risk. एक नया क्लास इमर्ज होता है ऑफ मर्चेंट्स, और ये मर्चेंट्स फिर बहुत प्रॉफिट करते हैं इन दिस ट्रेड, एंड दे आर एबल टू एक्यूमुलेट कैपिटल. इस ट्रेड में जो प्रॉफिट कमाया इन्होंने, अब वो उनके पास में सरप्लस अवेलेबल है, एंड दे आर रेडी विद दैट मनी टू इन्वेस्ट further. What is difference between capital and money? Money is when we use that as a means of exchange, and capital is when we invest it to get better returns. So these merchants who are now living a very good life, they have excess money which they want to use as capital. But they have one problem. What is the problem? The problem is that in Europe, there are many small weak kings. These weak kings are dependent on their feudal lords. You remember that discussion we just discussed a while ago? These feudal lords are not interested in trade and commerce because they derive Thakur Sahab ki tarah, they derive all of their resources and luxuries from whom? From the peasantry. So whenever a merchant wants to pass through the area of one Thakur Sahab or one feudal lord, he has to pay an octroi. Octroi is a local tax. And then when he crosses from his area to that of a new feudal lord, तो वहां फिर से उसको octroi देना है. And then again in the next one. तो इस तरीके से these merchants had to pay a lot of money on their goods. So what happens because of that? Cascading effect is created. Octroi हर एक स्टेज पर दे दे करके there is a cascading effect. These merchants felt that why should we pay so many of these feudal lords? Why can't we have one GST, one nation, one tax? Okay, that is so easy and convenient. We will pay. We are not against paying the tax, but why to pay to so many authorities? Instead, why not to one authority? So what do these people do? They help out the kings with their resources. Remember, the kings were weak. The kings were dependent on the feudal lords for revenue as well as for troops. So, with the help of these capitalists, the kings were able to mobilize resources and build huge, powerful armies. Okay, they were able to build what are called as gunpowder armies. Badi tope, big cannon guns. They were built by these rulers now with the help of resources from the merchants. Using these big gunpowder armies or big cannon guns, they blasted the castles of the feudal lords. You remember pehle kya hota tha? Feudal lords used to lock themselves up inside the castle. They had ample food, water, material, and human resource to survive for next several months. And the king's army would starve in the open. Now, what the king did, he started to build these big gunpowder armies, and using those big cannon guns, he could blast the castles of the feudal lords, and consequently, the feudal lords became now vulnerable. The feudal lords could not build these gunpowder armies. Why? Because it requires a lot of resource, which the feudal lords did not have. They did not have that much resource. The capitalist enabled the kings with their resource, and consequently, we will see the rise of absolute monarchy in Europe. Absolute monarchy in Europe. What is meant by absolute monarchy? Absolute monarchy means all the power of the state is concentrated in the hands of one ruler. That is called as absolute monarchy. Okay. Often this monarch used to claim a divine right to rule. Mera vachan hi hai shasan. If you've seen that movie Bahubali, where that lady, I am forgetting the name of that character, Shivagamini. Okay? She says, Mera vachan hi hai shasan. It's not a coincidence. It's a dialogue of Louis the 14th, guys. Louis the 14th ने कहा था, I am the state and my word is the law. He is the paragon of absolute monarchy. ठीक है? So यूरोप में अब हम देखते हैं rise of absolute monarch. जो power distributed था feudal lords में, अब वो ऊपर की तरफ concentrate हो जाता है in the hands of one ruler, the absolute monarch, and we will see decline of feudalism in Europe. ठीक है? With this decline of feudalism, once again we'll see increase of trade and commerce. Trade and commerce बढ़ जाएगा. Money based economy फिर से flourish करेगी. Cities will now again start to bustle. So जो medieval period में हमने characteristics देखी थी, उसके बिल्कुल opposite. Ancient period, we saw Roman Empire, concentration of power, trade and commerce, cities, monetization. Medieval period, weak kings, feudal lords, ruralization, backwardness, no trade and commerce, barter system. And then again, as we go towards modern, the clock is going to shift and we'll have a turnaround. Absolute monarch, trade and commerce, bustling cities, monetization of economy. This is a important backgrounder, my dear students. So I hope you understood up to this point, right? Now let us continue. Rise of mercantile capitalism. We are seeing the background of industrial revolution still. Rise of mercantile capitalism. Capitalism, that is investing of money to earn more returns. Basically, in short, is capitalism. The first stage of this capitalism is mercantile capitalism. What is this mercantile capitalism? In mercantile capitalism, capital is invested in trade. Goods which are cheap in one place are bought and sold in another place where they are more expensive to earn profit in the process. This is first stage of capitalism called as mercantile capitalism. So these capitalists, they were investing their money in what? In trade. The state also enabled or created conducive condition for this. This policy by the state is called as mercantilism. State wanted to maximize its exports and minimize its imports. Exports को maximize करना है और imports को minimize करना है. Why? Because if we export more and we are less dependent on imports, naturally we'll earn profits in the process. The country will get richer. If opposite happens, if we are importing more and exporting less, then there will be a deficit. Means the wealth of the country will be passed on to others. This was the idea or thought at that time. Okay? So this policy of mercantilism was practiced by the state. The state encouraged its citizens to go out and trade, export more, and dissuade it from imports. How did it do that? Through imperialism. Jesse Britain was controlling so many different areas. By having control over those areas, Britain could export its stuff to those places and reduce or limit its import. Tariffs, subsidies were used by the state for encouraging this practice. This is called as mercantilism. So I hope you understood, guys, how this transformation is taking place. Now, over the course of time, क्या हुआ कि ये जो capitalists थे, mercantile capitalists, they became very rich and prosperous. They became very powerful. They had enabled the king to end feudalism, but they were not satisfied with that alone. Now, they also wanted to have share in power. This led to glorious revolution in Britain in 1688. Glorious revolution. Without much bloodshed or hardly any bloodshed, in Britain, there was a transition of power. Ruler जो पहले absolute था, उसके absoluteness पर limit लाया गया through constitution, through parliamentary processes, and these rich capitalists, they got, access to power through parliamentary elections. That is glorious revolution. So you can see, guys, long distance trade that led to mercantile class. They accumulated profit. That profit they wanted to invest as capital, but the problem was feudalism. Around this time, they helped the ruler to become absolute monarch so that the feudal system ends. Once the feudal system ends, the capitalists are not satisfied with what they have. They want access to power also. So now they bring about limitation on the power of the ruler. They get access to parliamentary power. Got it? So I hope you got this. This is movement towards democracy in Britain. Okay. Around this time, another or two major developments are going to take place, which we must know about. First is agricultural revolution. All the science-related developments that were taking place were now being used or employed in the field of agriculture also. Now, because of the better knowledge of our environment, of atmosphere, of our planetary system, the seasonal rotation, so on and so forth, agriculture benefited immensely. Now, the sowing season, harvest season, they could be planned in a better way. Better tools and implements were developed for agriculture. For example, seed drills. Seed drills were used. पहले क्या होता था? Right from the times of Jesus till this point, the farmer used to just scatter the seeds. Broadcasting कहते हैं उसको. Used to broadcast the seed in the field. अब उसमें सिर्फ strike rate था 25% का. यानी for 100 seeds that were scattered, only 25 used to germinate. So इसको improve करने के लिए seed drills were developed. Now, these seed drills were poked into the soil and the seed was thrust inside a few inches. Now, because of this, this strike rate enhanced tremendously, and according to some books, it went to 75% also. So like this, many of the scientific know-how, the developments that were taking place were used in agriculture, and consequently, we saw increase in food production. food production enhanced tremendously in the 17th century. Okay. When food production enhances, what happens? We have better nutrition. When we have better nutrition, no famines, what happens? We have a population explosion. That is what will take place in England and other parts of Europe also. Okay? So this is one development that we must know. Next is the enclosure movement. Enclosure movement. We need to know a little about this enclosure movement. Okay? Enclosure movement में क्या हुआ? दोस्तों एनक्लोजर मूवमेंट के अंदर में गांव में जो लैंडलॉर्ड होते थे, इनके पास में बड़ी बड़ी जमीनें होती थी और ये जमीनें सभी के लिए एक्सेसिबल थी फॉर कल्टीवेशन. इन इमेजिन कीजिए कि कोई ठाकुर साहब हैं जिनकी गांव के अंदर में कई 100 एकड़ में जमीनें हैं और उसी गांव के अंदर में हरिया कोई किसान है जो ठाकुर साहब की जमीन के ऊपर में खेती करता है. ठाकुर साहब डज नॉट माइंड दैट because Hariya is cultivating and in return he is giving him rent. This system was prevalent in Britain. But in 15th, 16th, 17th century, these landlords realized कि agriculture में से हमको जितना return आता है, whatever return we get through agriculture is very less as compared to animal husbandry. ठीक है. So instead of allowing Hariya to cultivate on my field, if I enclose my land, यानी उस पर कंपाउंड अगर मैंने डाल दिया और उसमें if I rear sheep, then I will get wool which is more valuable in the market. It has demand in export also, so that will give me a better return. And therefore these landlords pressurized the British Parliament to pass laws to allow them to put up enclosures on their land and practice animal husbandry, disallowing the local peasants from cultivating. This is called as the enclosure movement. Now, since these landlords were socially and economically more powerful, therefore many laws were passed that allowed the landlords to enclose their lands for the sake of animal husbandry. That is called as enclosure movement. Now, how is it relevant over here? It is relevant over here, guys, because हरिया यानी जो वहां का या हैरी कह लीजिए कि वहां पर जो पीजेंट था, जो उस जमीन के ऊपर में पहले किसानी करता था, अब उसके पास में कोई ऑप्शन नहीं बचा. There is no land available in the village for cultivation. He is a young man. He has a family to take care of. He has some ambitions in his life. So he has to do something with it. So what will happen? He will have to migrate to the nearest town or city. May it be London, may it be Manchester or Liverpool or any other such city. He'll have to go there and seek job, seek some kind of work. So migration from rural areas to urban areas takes place. Because of agricultural revolution, already population has exploded. You have a lot more young people ready to work. These young people do not have access to land. Therefore, they will have to go where? They will have to go to towns and cities and present themselves for working where? In the factories that are now going to come up. All right. So I hope you understood, guys, this entire background of industrial revolution. Okay. Now let us try to understand the evolution of production system in Europe as well as many other parts of the world. There are 3 stages through which this evolution passes. First is called as the guild system. In ancient India, it was called as Shreni, the guild system. After that comes the putting out system. And third and last stage is factory system. So these are the stages through which system of production always evolved. Okay? We have to reach over here to the factory system, but for that we have to understand a little bit of background of the other two. Okay? So what are the features of guild system? Guild system के अंदर में a group of skilled craftsmen दे आर ऑर्गेनाइज टुगेदर। जैसे इमेजिन कीजिए कि किसी गांव के अंदर में ऑयल प्रेसर्स, एंशिएंट इंडिया में आप एनसीईआरटी में पढ़ते हैं तिल पैसका, ठीक है, जो ऑयल प्रेसर्स थे इनकी एक श्रेणी हुआ करती थी, गिल्ड हुआ करती थी, जो कि गुजरात में माइग्रेट कर गई थी फ्रॉम मालवा रीजन। ओके, तो ये कौन है? ये स्किल्ड क्राफ्ट्समैन है। ये क्या करते हैं? ये अपने आप को ऑर्गेनाइज करते हैं इनटू ग्रुप। चलिए हम एक काम करते हैं, हम सब एक ही प्रोफेशन में इन्वॉल्व है, सो व्हाई नॉट वी डू इट टुगेदर। हम एक साथ में अगर मिलके करेंगे तो क्या होगा? वी विल बी एबल टू रेगुलेट द प्रोडक्शन। कितना प्रोडक्शन निकालना है, किस क्वालिटी का प्रोडक्शन निकालना है, कैसे उसको बेचना है, ये सारी चीजें जो है वो हम मिलकर डिसाइड कर सकते हैं टू आवर एडवांटेज। अगर अलग अलग करेंगे तो क्या होगा? वी विल नॉट बी एबल टू मेक द मोस्ट फॉर आवरसेल्व्स। अगर एक साथ में मिलते हैं, ऑर्गेनाइज होते हैं, संगठित होकर के काम करते हैं, तो इससे हम ज्यादा बेटर तरीके से अपने आप को मेंटेन कर सकते हैं। सो फॉर दिस रीजन दे कम टुगेदर, ऑर्गेनाइज इनटू ग्रुप्स, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज गिल्ड। ठीक है, द गिल्ड, व्हाट सर्विस इट गिव्स? इट प्रोवाइड्स और कंट्रोल्स द एंट्री थ्रू अप्रेंटिसशिप। यानी गिल्ड के अंदर में कोई क्राफ्ट्समैन है, अब उसका बेटा जवान हो रहा है, ही इज इनटू हिज एडोलेसेंस और यंग टीन एज में है वो, तो अब उसको एज अप्रेंटाइज लिया जाएगा, उसको ट्रेन किया जाएगा। ठीक है, तो कौन ट्रेन कर रहा है? गिल्ड ट्रेन कर रहा है। नोबडी कैन ट्रेन अपार्ट फ्रॉम द गिल्ड। इससे क्या होता है? वो जो स्किल है ये किसको पास ऑन होगा? इसका कंट्रोल गिल्ड के पास में रहता है। ठीक है, दे आर ऑल्सो एबल टू मेंटेन क्वालिटी। किस लेवल का प्रोडक्शन होना चाहिए, क्या स्किल है, क्या फिनेस है, ये सारी चीजें जो है वो गिल्ड डिसाइड करता है। इसकी वजह से काम में एक यूनिफॉर्मिटी रह सकती है, क्वालिटी के स्टैंडर्ड्स बनाए जा सकते हैं। ठीक है, ये गिल्ड्स जो है ये छोटे वर्कशॉप्स के थ्रू काम करती थी, जनरली लोगों के घरों के अंदर में ही होती थी या अलग से भी हो सकती थी, और इस तरीके से प्रोडक्शन लिया जाता था। फोकस वॉज आर्टिसनल हाई क्वालिटी प्रोडक्शन टेलर्ड टू स्पेसिफिक कंज्यूमर नीड्स। ये गिल्ड की बेनिफिट्स हैं। इट बेनिफिट्स बोथ द क्राफ्ट्समैन एज वेल एज द एंड कंज्यूमर, बिकॉज एंड कंज्यूमर को हाई क्वालिटी प्रोडक्शन जो है वो स्टैंडर्ड प्रोडक्शन मिलता है, कंज्यूमर विल नॉट बी चीटेड। लिमिटेशन क्या है इसका? स्लो प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस है, एंड ऑल्सो देर इज नो इनोवेशन, क्योंकि गिल्ड अपने ही तरीके से काम करेगा, वही स्टैंडर्ड सेट करेगा, वो कभी कोई बड़ा इनोवेशन नहीं चाहेगा। दे जस्ट वांट थिंग्स टू कंटिन्यू एज स्टेटस को, जैसा चलता आया है पीढ़ियों से, पुरखों से, गिल्ड के अंदर में काम वैसा ही चलता रहेगा। तो ये पहला सिस्टम है दोस्तों गिल्ड का। ठीक है, नाउ सेकेंड सिस्टम इज कॉल्ड एज पुटिंग आउट सिस्टम। क्या होता है ये पुटिंग आउट सिस्टम में? जैसे हम मॉडर्न पीरियड की तरफ जाते हैं तो ये पुटिंग आउट सिस्टम शुरू होता है। भारत में इसको दादनी भी कहते थे। ओके, पुटिंग आउट सिस्टम। पुटिंग आउट सिस्टम के अंदर में अनलाइक वर्क गिल्ड जहां पर वर्कर्स ऑर्गेनाइज थे, यहां पर में वर्कर्स कंप्लीटली डिसेंट्रलाइज्ड है। इन वर्कर्स को डायरेक्टली मर्चेंट्स कांटेक्ट करते हैं, और ये मर्चेंट्स वर्कर्स को रॉ मटेरियल देते हैं। ठीक है, कभी कभी टूल्स भी दे देते थे, टूल्स ऑल्सो, और ये वर्कर्स को कहते थे कि भैया हमको ये काम इस तरीके से करके चाहिए। ठीक है, अब ये गरीब रूरल एरियाज के अंदर में जो हाउस होल्ड्स थी, इनको ये काम दिया जाता था। इनके पास में बहुत अच्छी ट्रेनिंग होती थी, ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है, उनको बस बताया जाता था कि भाई ये रॉ मटेरियल है, ये चाहिए तो तुम टूल्स भी रख लो, कुछ चाहिए तो एडवांस भी दे देते थे, तो ये काम कंप्लीट करके हमको देना है। So this was a supplementary income for whom? For the rural household. Okay? मर्चेंट के लिए बेटर था, क्योंकि अब कंट्रोल मर्चेंट के पास था, गिल्ड के पास नहीं। मर्चेंट अपने हिसाब से डिक्टेट कर सकता था प्राइस, क्वालिटी, स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ वर्क, और अपना दबदबा उस वर्किंग हाउस होल्ड के ऊपर में रख सकता था। सो दिस बेनिफिटेड दी मर्चेंट। वर्कर्स के लिए भी ठीक ही था, बिकॉज इनको पैसा भी मिल रहा है, एंड दे आर नॉट जस्ट इनटू दिस वर्क। गिल्ड में क्या है कि ही इज डूइंग ओनली दैट गिल्ड वाला वर्क, दैट क्राफ्ट्समैन वाला वर्क। हियर ही इज फ्री टू डू एग्रीकल्चरल वर्क, अदर वर्क, एंड इन एडिशन ही इज गेटिंग दिस वर्क ऑल्सो। सो वर्कर गेट्स सम फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी। Work was done in homes and not in workshops, unlike in case of गिल्ड्स। बेनिफिट क्या है इसमें? इसमें आउटपुट और ज्यादा निकल सकता है, गिल्ड अपने हिसाब से काम करेगा, बट यहां मर्चेंट जो है वो ज्यादा और लोगों को काम दे करके एक्स्ट्रा काम करवा सकता है, सो मोर प्रोडक्शन कैन बी डन। कॉस्ट भी इसके अंदर में वर्क मर्चेंट के लिए कम हो जाती थी, बिकॉज नाउ ही इज डिक्टेटिंग। पहले गिल्ड ऑर्गेनाइज था, अगर आपको चाहिए ये चीज तो हमारे पास ही आना पड़ेगा, वी आर नॉट गोइंग टू अलाउ अदर्स टू लर्न दिस स्किल, सो गिल्ड की एक मोनोपोली होती थी। नाउ द मर्चेंट इज हैविंग मल्टीपल ऑप्शंस, ही कैन train anybody, give that work to anybody. Limitations, inconsistent quality. Guild में he is a very professional worksman, यहां पर में that is not the case, so quality is down, efficiency is also not very good, so these are the disadvantages. Okay, this could not keep up with the rising demand for textile and goods. जैसे जैसे population बढ़ रहा है, demand बढ़ रही है, तो putting out system इसको demand को satisfy नहीं कर पाएगा, क्योंकि वर्कर्स अपने घर पर बैठ करके कितना ही काम करेंगे, राइट? तो इस सब का आखिरी में सिस्टम निकलता है इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन में, विच इज कॉल्ड एज फैक्ट्री सिस्टम। पहले था गिल्ड, देन वी हैड पुटिंग आउट, एंड देन वी कम टू फैक्ट्री। हाउ इज फैक्ट्री डिफरेंट? फैक्ट्री इज अ लार्ज centralized place where workers operated machinery to mass produce goods. पहले वाली सिस्टम से कंपेयर कीजिए, पहले या तो छोटे वर्कशॉप्स थे या तो हाउस होल्ड में काम होता था, अब यहां क्या हो रहा है, एक लार्ज सेंट्रलाइज्ड प्लेस है जहां पर में मशीनरी लगी हुई है, मास प्रोडक्शन किया जा रहा है गुड्स का। अर्लियर इट वाज ओनली अबाउट ह्यूमन पावर, नाउ इट इज स्टीम पावर, water power, and then later on electricity also to drive the machines. Naturally, this will be much more efficient than earlier systems. Division of labor is done. एक वर्कर को एक ही काम दिया जाएगा मशीन के ऊपर, ठीक है? इससे क्या होता है? स्पेशलाइजेशन आता है, एफिशिएंसी इंप्रूव होती है। पहले ऐसा नहीं था, एक ही वर्कर एक पूरा प्रोडक्ट एंड तक तैयार करता था, so naturally there was no specialization. Here the worker is given very specific work, so specialized and more efficient. Control, strict oversight on the worker. वर्कर क्या कर रहा है इसके ऊपर में सुपरवाइजर, उसके ऊपर में मैनेजर, और फिर उसके ऊपर में फैक्ट्री ओनर, कैपिटलिस्ट, इन सब का ध्यान होगा। वर्किंग आवर्स और वेजेस ये पूरी तरीके से फैक्ट्री ओनर के कंट्रोल में होते हैं, सो कंट्रोल इज मच बेटर। All of these factories lead to urbanization. First of all, the factories were located in small towns, और उसमें से बड़ी cities बनती चली गई, और factories जो है वो kernel बनी. If you see many places in India, like for example, near Pune there is another twin city called as Pimpri-Chinchwad. Now that city developed because of the factories that came up in the MIDC area over there. Exactly same thing is what is happening in Industrial Revolution. These factories become the core around which industries develop. Advantage, mass production is possible at lower cost, standardized quality and quicker production, less time में production होगा. But limitation क्या है? Workers का exploitation. Working conditions बहुत खराब होगी, क्योंकि फैक्ट्री ओनर चाहता है मैक्सिमम प्रॉफिट, और उसके लिए वह लोवेस्ट पॉसिबल वेजेस एंड वर्स्ट कंडीशन फॉर वर्कर्स रखता है, ताकि उसका प्रॉफिट जो है वो इंक्रीज हो सके. सो दीज आर दी लिमिटेशन. ट्रेडिशनल जो स्किल था वर्कर का वो अब नहीं रहा, अब मशीन करती है हर सब कुछ, वर्कर का काम जो है वो बस स्पेसिफिक वहां पर में एक्शंस करना होता है जो कि मशीन को फंक्शनल रखेगी, बाकी मशीन अपना काम करती है खुद से. सो पहले जो हुनर वाला काम था, क्राफ्ट्समैनशिप वाला काम था, ऑल ऑफ दैट इज नाउ ended in the factory system. So these are the three system, guys: guild, putting out, and factory. I have discussed it in detail. This table quickly summarizes it, so you can see it later in the PDF attached with this lecture. I hope you've understood these three systems. Okay, so now we have arrived at the factory system in Industrial Revolution. We understood what is Industrial Revolution. After that, we saw how the background of Europe brought us to this place. Thirdly, we saw the evolution of production system. Now let us go into deeper about how the revolution actually takes place. Industrial revolution starts with the टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री फर्स्ट। आपने देखा होगा ब्रिटेन के अंदर में इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन में सबसे पहले ये टेक्सटाइल इसी से शुरुआत हुई। इन इंडिया ऑल्सो ड्यूरिंग ब्रिटिश टाइम्स when industrialization started, you will see that the first major industries industries that developed were based on textile, whether it was in Bombay, whether it was in Calcutta as it was called then. The industries were textile industries. So why is it that textile developed first? इसके हम कुछ reasons देखते हैं। सबसे पहला, huge demand for textile। हमने देखा कि 17th 18th सेंचुरी में पॉपुलेशन एक्सप्लोजन हो रहा था। इस पॉपुलेशन एक्सप्लोजन के चलते द फर्स्ट थिंग दैट वाज नीडेड वाज ऑफ कोर्स क्लोथिंग इज अ बेसिक नेसेसिटी, नॉट ओनली इन यूरोप बट ऑल्सो इन कॉलोनियल एरियाज। यूरोप का मार्केट तो था ही जहां पर पॉपुलेशन बढ़ रहा था, एट द सेम टाइम these 6-7 European powers, they were also having distant colonial possessions और वहां के मार्केट में भी इसकी खूब डिमांड थी। दिस सेक्टर वाज एक्सपोर्ट ओरिएंटेड। देखिए यूरोप पे सिर्फ बना करके तो नहीं चलेगा ना, या सिर्फ अपनी कंट्री के लिए बनाकर नहीं चलेगा। मजा तो तब आएगा जब हम उसको एक्सपोर्ट करें और उसमें से ज्यादा प्रॉफिट कमाएं। टेक्सटाइल सेक्टर बड़ा आसान था एक्सपोर्ट के लिए। क्यों? पहले तो डिमांड है, फिर जो प्रोड्यूस है उसका वेट बहुत कम है, तो क्या होता है, ट्रांसपोर्ट करना आसान है, नॉन पेरिशेबल है, यानी कई महीनों तक सालों तक भी अगर आपका माल पड़ा रहता है, बिकता नहीं है, तो भी वो खराब नहीं होने वाला है। सो नॉन पेरिशेबल। ट्रांसपोर्ट करना इजी है, उसको हैंडलिंग इजी है, पैकेजिंग इजी है, कैरिंग इजी है, राइट, एंड प्रॉफिट मार्जिन भी खूब थे। तो ये सारी चीजों की वजह से टेक्सटाइल वॉज वेरी वेरी अट्रैक्टिव फॉर एक्सपोर्ट। थर्ड, रॉ मटेरियल्स आसानी से अवेलेबल थे। ब्रिटेन के पास भारत जैसी कॉलोनी थी, अमेरिका की 13 कॉलोनीज थी, और यहां से कॉटन बड़ी आसानी से मिल रहा था। ब्रिटेन का अपना खुद का वुल प्रोडक्शन भी बहुत हाई था, एंड दीज वर द बेसिक रॉ मटेरियल्स फॉर टेक्सटाइल। ये इजीली अवेलेबल थे। देन मैकेनाइजेशन वाज इजी फॉर टेक्सटाइल। टेक्सटाइल बनाने की जो प्रक्रिया थी, ये सदियों से वी हैव बीन डूइंग दिस एज ह्यूमन बीइंग्स। सो जिनिंग होता है, स्पिनिंग होता है। जिनिंग मतलब कॉटन में से सीड्स निकालना। उसके बाद स्पिनिंग होता है जिसके अंदर में यान बनता है, और फिर उस यान को वीव करके कपड़ा बनाया जाता है। जिनिंग, स्पिनिंग एंड वीविंग, 3 steps. All of these 3 steps, the 3 processes, they could be easily mechanized. So that's why also textile was taken up first. Okay. Base for industrialization in this sector was ready. यानी जो हमने steps देखे अभी, गिल्ड सिस्टम, पुटिंग आउट सिस्टम, और फिर फैक्ट्री सिस्टम। तो टेक्सटाइल में ऑलरेडी पुटिंग आउट सिस्टम ये बहुत बड़े स्केल पर हो रहा था। नेक्स्ट लॉजिकल डेवलपमेंट वाज फैक्ट्री सिस्टम, एंड देयरफॉर इट वाज वेरी इजी टू ट्रांजिशन टू टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री। सपोर्ट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर जो चाहिए था वो भी अवेलेबल था। वाटर वाज देयर फॉर स्टीम पावर, इट वाज देयर फॉर ट्रांसपोर्ट, रोड्स डेवलप हो चुकी थी, एंड ऑल ऑफ दिस एनेबल्ड easy movement of goods. टेक्नोलॉजिकल स्पिल ओवर। इस इंडस्ट्री में जो भी टेक्नोलॉजी डेवलप हुई, जो भी प्रोसेसेस डेवलप हुई, सिस्टम्स डेवलप हुई, फिर उसको दूसरी इंडस्ट्रीज में अप्लाई करना आसान, राइट। टेक्सटाइल में इट वाज इजी बिकॉज ऑफ दीज थिंग्स, एंड देन व्हेन इट डेवलप्ड इन टेक्सटाइल, देन फ्रॉम टेक्सटाइल इट वाज देन यूज्ड टू अदर इंडस्ट्रीज। स्पिल ओवर क्रिएट हुआ। सो दैट्स व्हाई टेक्सटाइल बिकेम द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट, you can say, industry for industrial revolution. So I hope if a question is asked, 10 marker question is asked, or a part of the question talks about this, you have sufficient points to address it. Okay, right. We must know some of the major developments, technological developments that took place. सबसे पहले फ्लाइंग शटल डेवलप हुआ फॉर वीविंग। देखिए प्रोसेस कैसी होती है, पहले होता है जिनिंग, फिर होता है स्पिनिंग, फिर होता है वीविंग। ठीक है, सो वीविंग में फ्लाइंग शटल डेवलप हुआ, और इसकी वजह से 8 times 8x जो है वो वीविंग की स्पीड बढ़ गई। सो दैट बिकेम वेरी क्रूशियल। देन स्पिनिंग जेनी केम, वीविंग बढ़ गया तो क्या हो गया, यान की डिमांड बढ़ गई, यान से कपड़ा बनता है ना, राइट। अब जब वीविंग की स्पीड बढ़ गई है तो यान की डिमांड बढ़ गई, तो यान की स्पीड को, यान बनाने की स्पीड को वी हैड टू इंक्रीज. So that led to development of spinning jenny by Hargreaves. This also enhanced the production speed tremendously. Then water frame by Arkwright. Water frame was used जिसके अंदर में water की पावर जो है वो यूज करके वीविंग की जाती थी. So again वीविंग की स्पीड was enhanced. So this is first step, weaving speed increased. Second, spinning की speed increase हुई. Then again we have a major step for weaving. So weaving is again enhanced. Then comes a new machine which is called as a mule, which combines both these, spinning jenny here, this one, and water frame. Samuel Crompton built this. So both the process, spinning and weaving, could be done on this water frame. So this was another significant development. Then power loom came about. Then cotton gin was developed by Ellie Whitney. Cotton gin enabled the removing of cotton seeds. आपने cotton देखा होगा, raw cotton, उसमें छोटे छोटे seeds होते हैं. Those seeds have to be removed. Only then the cotton can be used to make yarn. So once all of this speed was enhanced so much, there was tremendous need for cotton. Now, how will we generate all of that cotton? For that, the cotton gin was developed, and this enabled the removing of the seeds on a much faster pace, and consequently the cotton was made available for the textile industry. So these were the major developments. Apart from this, there are many other technological developments that took place which enabled industrial revolution. MacAdam developed the Pakka road, macadamized road as it is called. Steam engine first developed by Thomas Newcomen. I know you might be thinking it should be James Watt. Yes, James Watt improved it and made it functional, but first it was developed by Thomas Newcomen. Canal building, steel making, steamboat, steam engine for railway, rubber tire, telegraph, all of these are major technological developments that enabled the industrial revolution. A detailed note is given to you in the notes for world history, so you can read about these. These will come in handy as examples, okay, in your answers. So these are the major technological developments. Fine. Apart from this, we must also know briefly about transatlantic slave trade. What was this transatlantic slave trade? Now, when Europeans made their colonies here in North and also in South America, what happened was, in these colonies, the European colonialists, they had started different types of plantations, cotton, coffee, so on and so forth. And these plantations, their cost of production had to be kept very low. This cotton, sugar, and all of these things, they had to be sold to Europe, right? But the cost of production had to be kept low. So for that reason, first, these people started to forcibly employ the local Native American tribes. जबरदस्ती उनको जो है उस फील्ड में काम करवाया जाता था. But the harsh climate, it's tropical, it's very hot, humid. Because of that, these tribes, local tribes, they could not survive the hard work over there. Consequently, the Europeans realized that there is no point in wasting effort on the Native Americans. We need a more stronger human race for working in these fields. For this reason, they felt that people in Africa, they are much more strong, robust. And therefore, if we can get African slaves to work over here on the plantations, then we can do it profitably. It will be practical to do that. So this started a triangular trade which is called as transatlantic slave trade. European merchants used to start from Europe, Great Britain, France, and other places, and they used to carry manufactured goods, textile, rum, etc. to Africa. और अफ्रीका में जाकर यहाँ पर जो लोकल अफ्रीकन चीफ्स होते थे, they used to give their products or sell their products to these African chiefs. And in return, they used to buy black African slaves from here, west coast of Africa. Sometimes, yes, there were slave markets and slavery was there in Africa, but these white people, they used to encourage and sometimes even participate in slave raids. They used to take these slaves across the Atlantic. This is called as the Middle Passage of the transatlantic slave trade. Millions and millions of black African people, men, women, children, they were transported from Africa to the New World. And here they were sold to the plantation owners. और फिर यहाँ से इस New World से after selling these slaves, these people used to buy the raw material, may it be cotton, may it be other things, sugar and other stuff like that, and then go and sell it back in Europe. So these were the three arms. So this is the first arm from Europe to Africa. This is the second arm from Africa to Europe. And this is the third arm from, Africa to America. And this is the third arm from America to back to Europe again. This trade is called as the transatlantic slave trade. This is one of the most, a dark chapter of the history of humankind, particularly of our early modern times. Millions and millions of Africans being transported over there along the way. Hardly 10%, 90% died on this route only. Only 10% survived. And these 10% were actually the unlucky ones. Why? Because they had a much more worse life awaiting for them on the plantation. They were sold into slavery, made to work very hard. They died very young over there because of the entire physical work burden or labor that they had to go through, and very indignified kind of conditions they had to live. I'll suggest a movie, 12 Years a Slave. It used to be there on Netflix. I don't know if it's there now. Just a second. 12 Years a Slave. It's a good movie. You'll get a good idea about what kind of conditions the slaves had to go through. 12 Years a Slave. Beautiful movie. Oscar-winning movie. Right? So this is the transatlantic slave trade. Now, let us come to the next dimension of this topic regarding why this revolution took place in England first. Why does it start from England? And as you have seen, UPSC has already asked a question on this. I'll just take a quick sip and then we'll continue. UPSC has asked a question on why this revolution started in England. तो हम इसके अलग अलग डायमेंशंस को देखते हैं, स्टार्टिंग विद जियोग्राफिकल फैक्टर्स फर्स्ट. सबसे पहला फैक्टर इंग्लैंड और उसके आसपास में, आई मीन यू कैन से द एंटायर मॉडर्न डे यूके, बट फॉर आवर सेक वील से ग्रेट ब्रिटेन. Of course, you have England here, Wales and Scotland, okay? And when you include Ireland into that, Northern Ireland, then it becomes UK. Without Northern Ireland, it is Great Britain. So they have a very complex kind of system. In sports, they participate individually. In European Union, they're there as UK, and in some other things, they are without Northern Ireland, it is Great Britain. So that is how their structure is there. And anyways, coming back here, why it starts in England, we'll see the geographical factors. First factor is the island nature of this country. Because it was having a nature of an island, unlike other parts of continental Europe, this region was much more stable politically. It was much more stable. Europe was constantly going through warfare. They fought the Crusades at the turn of the millennium. Then after that, there were wars between Protestants and Catholics. And then subsequently, there were wars related to ideas of nationalism. Europe was throughout going through a lot of different convulsions. लेकिन ब्रिटेन चूंकि अलग थलग था as an island, that is why it was politically much more stable. And since it was politically stable, capitalists were ready to invest in Europe. Capitalists were ready to invest. This also helped to develop democracy in England. Why democracy? See, in other places there was constant warfare, and therefore people required a strong ruler. You see, people of France loved Napoleon, and even when Napoleon was long gone, they loved that memory of France dominating over other European powers. So Europe, in a way, wanted strong rulers. Why? Because a strong ruler alone could protect against foreign invasions. But in case of Britain, that was not the case. Because of this island nature, it was much more stable. And because it was stable, the next dream was unlocked, that is of democracy. You see, modern democracy का गढ़ है ब्रिटेन, और इसकी एक बड़ी वजह इसकी ज्योग्राफी में छुपी हुई है. इस स्टेबिलिटी के चलते the British people, saw the movements of democracy. More and more people having share in power. Okay? The king or the ruler progressively became more and more titular, and the people became the real, rulers through parliamentary democracy. It was possible for Britain, but not for France. The reason being, it was an island and more stable. Then it has natural harbors. You see its geography, it has a very crooked kind of a coastline. And this crooked coastline creates places where you can have natural harbors. ठीक है, समंदर में जो डिस्टर्बेंस होती है उससे एक नेचुरल प्रोटेक्शन ऐसे एरियाज को मिलता है. And because of this, harbors develop. Like for example, if you see the Mumbai harbor, it is because of that crooked coastline that a separate area is created which is relatively safer from the disturbance in the sea. And that's why a natural harbor is there. And you'll see all major ports in the world, generally speaking, they are such natural harbors. Britain was blessed with such natural harbors. Naturally, this was very important for trade. Because of this, Britain had a long history of maritime activity. Maritime मतलब क्या होता है? Means seafaring. Seafaring, going into the sea for trade, for other purposes. That is maritime activity. So Britain had a rich history of that. This was needed for long distance trade, for exporting your stuff. Without this, you cannot do it. Then rich reserves of coal and iron. These red areas that you see, these red areas are reserves of coal, and yellow are reserves of iron. So you can see Britain has abundant natural resources for industrial revolution. Coal was the source of fuel, and iron was a basic raw material that was required for making factories, for making machines. So all of that was abundantly available. Crisscrossing tributaries. Many rivers and tributaries, they intersected, and because of that, canal-based navigation was possible. Steam engine was used to build steam engine-driven ships that could be used for transportation of raw material, transportation of finished goods, so on and so forth. Canal-based transport developed here in England and other places. Okay, so these are the geographical factors. Political factors, there will be some overlap here, guys. So political stability ensured that laws were framed in such a manner that industrial revolution got a boost in it. Many laws were passed for this reason. Democratic developments. Britain developed as a democracy in Europe and became the mother, in so to speak, of modern democracy. These democratic developments, इनकी वजह से क्या हुआ? The capitalist class got access to power. Through parliamentary elections, it got access to power. And using this power, again, it could shape the state's policies in such a way that industrial revolution was favored. Thus, the nature of the state became pro-capitalist. खुद कैपिटलिस्ट भी पार्लियामेंट का पार्ट बन रहे हैं, and they are also exerting influence on other parliamentarians. Okay, even the ruling class, whether it was the earlier elite, the kings, the lords, so on and so forth, they also understood the importance of industrial revolution, mercantilism, and trade. And because of this, they invested their own resources in the process, and consequently, they were more amenable, they were more favoring towards industrial revolution. Ruling class का support था. This was not the case with France. फ्रांस की जो रूलिंग क्लास थी वो फ्यूडल माइंडसेट वाली थी, और इस वजह से हम देखते हैं फ्रांस में इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन काफी लेट डेवलप होगा, बट नॉट इन केस ऑफ ब्रिटेन. लॉज लाइक एनक्लोजर लॉज जिसकी हमने बात की थी, नेविगेशन लॉज वर पास्ड बाय द स्टेट व्हिच हेल्प्ड इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन. ये नेविगेशन लॉज क्या थे? इस नेविगेशन लॉ में ब्रिटेन ने ये कहा कि हमारा जितना भी ट्रेड है, यानी ब्रिटेन और कॉलोनीज का ट्रेड, all of this has to be done by using only British shipping. You cannot use other countries' shipping. So how did it help? How did this help? This was naturally a big boost. Britain is relatively a small country in that sense, but its empire was massive. The sun never sets on the British Empire, they used to say. अब इतने बड़े empire का शिपिंग जो है कॉलोनियल एम्पायर का, ये सिर्फ ब्रिटिश कंपनीज ही करेगी. सो दिस वाज लाइक अ मोनोपोली फॉर देम. सो मेनी सच लॉज वर पास्ड व्हिच एनेबल्ड इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन इन ब्रिटेन. सो वी सॉ ज्योग्राफिकल फैक्टर्स, वी सॉ पॉलिटिकल फैक्टर्स. नाउ लेट अस सी द इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर्स दैट एनेबल्ड इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन इन ब्रिटेन. इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर्स में फर्स्ट, एनक्लोजर मूवमेंट. We saw what that was. Because of enclosure movement, the peasants in the village did not have access to land, agriculture, and therefore they were unemployed in rural areas. So that made labor available for factories. We saw the agricultural revolution also. It gave a boost to food production, and food production created big population. Big population means what? Two things. One, bigger market, and number two, you have more labor. Okay, so both these things helped in industrial revolution. Thirdly, availability of capital. Since Britain had a big colonial empire, so a lot of long distance trade was taking place with colonies, और उसमें से एक मर्चेंट क्लास इमर्ज होता है जो इस ट्रेड के जरिए से कैपिटल एक्यूमुलेट करता है. ब्रिटेन में अब कैपिटल था, जो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट जरूरत थी इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन की. इन मॉडर्न बैंकिंग सिस्टम, बैंक ऑफ इंग्लैंड 600 years old. ब्रिटेन इज द होम ऑफ मॉडर्न बैंकिंग. 1857 में दोस्तों भारत में 3 मॉडर्न बैंक्स थी, वो भी ब्रिटिश एस्टैब्लिश थी, एंड ब्रिटेन हैड 600. एंड इंडिया बाय द वे मींस entire Indian subcontinent almost, right? 3 banks. और उतने छोटे से ब्रिटेन में you had 600 banks in 1857. So you can imagine how big a resource this was. Banking system means what? You have access to credit, right? You have access to payment systems. These are so essential for any industry to develop. Major cities were developing. Manchester, Liverpool, London to tha hi, or भी, other cities. These cities are basically, the bustling grounds of industrial revolution for Britain. Transport. I told you about the macadamized roads, pakka roads that were developed. Railway introduction, 1814, it first starts. In 1833, for transport of people, it was used. Railway introduced. Postal system. You know what Dalhousie gave to India in 1854? Uniform rate of postage. That system was developed there in Britain, postal system. Technical training institutes. We have something called as ITIs, industrial training institutes in our country, where young boys are given the skill of some kind of work, maybe welding, fitting, some other type of work that is required in industry. This is what developed in Britain. It developed in Britain first, such training institutions. So now let's see last, social factors. Practical bent of mind of British people. इंडस्ट्री के लिए जरूरत होती है एप्लीकेशन बेस्ड नॉलेज की, साइंस की नहीं. साइंस एक लेवल पर इंपॉर्टेंट है, बट आफ्टर दैट यू नीड मोर ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी, application. The British people have that attitude, even to this date. They're not that keen about basic science. They will take the basic science and see how it can be applied to make something easier. 3,000 innovations were done by workers in the Industrial Revolution. Practical bent of mind. Okay? Second, entrepreneurial nature. धंधा करना आना चाहिए. Okay? We have so many communities in India, maybe Parsis, we have different Marwari communities who are into business. And you know, if you are one of them, you will know that if you have some friends, you would have surely seen it. There is a certain attitude that you need to do business. That is called as the entrepreneurial mindset. The ability to take risk, the ability to minimize cost, the ability to, you know, seek an opportunity, go after it, fetch it, ensure it. All of that is part of that entrepreneurial mindset. The British, as a society, they had this mindset. Then liberal and experimenting nature. ठहरा हुआ पानी और ठहरा हुआ आदमी ये हमेशा सड़ जाते हैं. You know, one of my coach used to say, the more liberal you are, the more open you are to new thoughts, new ideas, new experiments, the more you will develop. This is a rule of, you know, human history. The British in the 19th century, you know, liberalism as an idea was at its peak. Liberalism किस चीज की बात करता है? Individual freedom की. Free speech, expression, thought, belief, etc. etc. तो ये ब्रिटेन के समाज में उस वक्त में this was the dominant idea. Why is America at the top today? Liberal and experimenting. They don't hold you back, right? The same thing we can see over here in Britain also. Free from church का influence. Roman Catholic Church, यूरोप पे उसका domination था, but Britain had long ago established its own separate church, Anglican Church, और उस चर्च को भी बहुत लिमिटेड रखा था. ठीक है? And because of this, religion did not have a debilitating impact on Britain, unlike say France or Spain or Italy for that matter. ठीक है? Italy of course was still too forge as a nation, but the impact of church was very strong over there also. So free from church influence. All of these factors, social factors, enabled Britain to, you know, develop its industrial revolution. Okay. After this, we are going to see the spread of industrial revolution to other parts of the world, but not in this lecture, in the lecture that follows it. In this subsequent part of industrial revolution, a brief talk we will have about how industrial revolution spread to other parts of Europe, and then subsequently we'll see the impact or consequences of industrial revolution. That is coming up in the very next lecture. I'll see you in that class.